Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier session related to chapter 4, unit 1 of business economics, we discussed about what is the meaning of market and what are different types of markets, different categories of markets, how can we classify them according to various bases. And also, what are the basic characteristics of a market? What are the features that markets do exhibit? And in order to call anything a market, definitely there should be an exchange of goods or services, and that should be naturally for a price. And this chapter itself is altogether about how different markets will determine prices under different circumstances. But in order to know that, we should also understand what are the categories of markets, what types of market structures are there. And once again, I want to give a clarification in advance that don't try to fix any real life situation to these theories or names of market structures. Of course, we will take some examples, only understand them as examples. Don't take them too literally, or don't think whatever we imagine by just sitting and reading about the names of the market structures will really happen out there in the real life. So that care has to be taken. Otherwise, as usual, a lot of thoughts will come naturally, and those will confuse many of the brains, because there will be a lot of overlaps here, a lot of interconnections, and it is not possible to exactly define this is what it is and this is what it will be in real life. Once again, what we are understanding or what we are going to understand or try to understand is only the theoretical aspects of market structures, what kind of market structures can be theoretically defined, and what are the characteristics of those types of markets is our objective. Of course, in order to understand that, we will take some examples. That does not necessarily mean those examples are 100% correct. That does not necessarily also mean we try to fit everything into the framework that has been defined here, as if there are only 4 types of markets in reality. But somewhere in between, the markets exhibit the characteristics definitely that we are going to discuss. So that has to be kept in the mind while understanding this market structures. Of course, as far as a consumer is concerned, a buyer is concerned, it doesn't matter what kind of market structure in which he is buying. For him, there is a price which is defined for a product, and there is a producer who is offering to sell the products or services. And naturally, if the consumer is willing to buy and has the capacity to buy, automatically he will buy. Otherwise, he will not buy. But the point is, the consumers and producers, both of them having their place in the same market, will have representation from 2 different sides. On one side, that is demand. On the other side, that is supply. But for the producer or the business for which we are trying to learn the economics, whatever the demand that is created by the consumers is its potential revenue. That is the revenue that a producer or a supplier is going to gain from his consumers. And of course, if the producer knows the costs also, naturally the revenues minus costs will give him profit, and the producer can identify, compute, and try to maximize that profit. It's a simple logical thing. When again we talk about theory, Practically, that is what all the people in the world are dying for. All the business people, entrepreneurs, too many people in big companies, all are daily doing the same thing. What is that? How to maximize profit, or how to maximize revenues, or how to minimize costs. All of them are towards the same objective. If you earn more revenue with lesser cost, that only will maximize profit. But in order to do that, they should know how much potential revenue they have. For that, they should know what is their demand curve, means what is the characteristics of the demand for such products, what they are offering. And also, of course, how the consumers behave in relation to that product. And because supply is in their hands, they will decide how much quantity to supply by applying the theories of production and cost. And as a combination of these three items, one is revenue, one is cost, and the other one is profit. Ultimately, a firm or an organization will be able to thrive, will be able to grow if it is capable of maximizing its profit by regularly increasing its revenue, means basically increasing its customer base and increasing the demand for its products or services, by observing the consumer behavior and making them satisfied. That is one side. Another side, within the organization, applying proper production technologies and scientific production planning, which minimizes the cost, so that with the maximum revenue or better revenue with lower costs, it can maximize the profits. This is very simple to tell or talk, but it is the biggest challenge that every firm faces on a daily basis. But that's what they strive for. That's what they work towards every day. So that is what the firms are supposed to know about their own demand curve, about their own production strategy, and their own cost. And now also they have to know not just about themselves, they also need to know what about the competitors, what others are doing, what other competitors in the market are doing, how they are selling the similar products, and what the changes in the price is going to have an impact on its market share. Will there be any impact or not? Let us say if one firm reduces its price, will the other organizations also follow it or not? Like this, millions of questions will be there that the organizations have to answer. And for that purpose, it has to look at not only its own demand curve, not only its own production and cost strategies, but also towards the market which is outside the organization, which consists of not only one organization, many organizations, all of them working in the same market. So, it is also important for the organizations to understand how the markets behave, how the competition is there in the markets. That is also important to know. That is why we are trying to understand different types of markets and what kind of market is there outside in which a particular organization is operating. That they should know. For that, they should know first of all what are the types of markets. And that's what we are trying to know also. There are different types of markets. There can be situations where there is only one firm in the market, only one, just one. That means that is a kind of monopoly, because the entire market demand will be satisfied by only one particular firm. Or other side, let us say there are two large firms only in the industry. It is not one, there are two or three, very less number of firms in the industry. They will share the market demand in some kind of proportion, some percentage. Best example for that can be Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Throughout the world, these are the two large firms which share the entire soft drink markets. Entire market of soft drinks is generally shared by these two only. Are there not other competitors for them? Yes, there are competitors for them, but those are very so small that they cannot be competing with these two giants, large firms, Pepsi company and Coca-Cola company. That is another type of market situation. If there is only one firm in the market, that is, there is no competition, that is monopoly. For example, in India, Indian Railways is monopoly, at least now. In future, we don't know, slowly that also probably is going to be privatized stepwise in future. We'll wait and see for that. But as of now, it is monopoly. So there is no private train operators so far. That means anybody who wants to travel by train, they have to choose Indian Railways only. There is no option. But bus travel is not like that. You can choose RTC bus, or you can choose Orange Travels, VRL Travels, XYZ, that travel, this travel. There are many travels which are there. Any of them you can choose if you want to travel from one place to other place in a bus. But if you want to travel from one place to another place in a train, what choice you have? Organization wise, you have only one choice. Trains, you can have multiple choices. Within the train, you can have choice of whether to travel by sleeper class or first class or third class, whatever. 2-tier, 1-tier, 3-tier, different classes are there. That is within the train. But which organization you have to travel with? No option, Indian Railways. That means it is a kind of monopoly. Only one firm is there in that particular segment in this market. There are other cases where many firms are there having a competitive environment. Like this, different types of markets are there. What our job here is to understand what kind of market structure is prevalent for a particular type of industry. Like this, many types of markets will be there. Just for another example, let us say there are more than 5,000 small firms in an industry. Then each firm will be less worried about the reactions of the other firms, because everybody is having only a very small proportion of the market. Again, it's an imagination example only to be looked at like an example. So many firms are there. Each of them is having a very small percentage of share in the market. Then they don't care much about the others. They will take decisions according to their convenience, according to their customer base, which will be a generally loyal customer base to them. Within their small group, they will cater to their customers like that. So the point is, the decisions that are taken by the organizations are going to definitely be depending upon the market behavior, and that is going to be greatly affected by the market structure. In other words, the type of market. There might be thousands of types of market structures, as I said already. You cannot say that there are only 4 types of market structure. That's all. I will try to fit everything into these 4 only. That is practically not correct. But once again, we have no option. In our MCQ questions, only 4 options are there. A, B, C, D. There you cannot tell, I don't know which one of this is correct. You have to find out one correct answer out of them. But that is a limitation of MCQ type of questioning. That is from examination point of view. Learning and knowledge acquisition point of view, we cannot fit this, any type of situation, into exactly 100% in these 4 structures. But yes, somewhere in between them, there will be some characteristics shown by the reality. We can almost tell this is looking like this, but we cannot exactly tell this is what it is. So care has to be taken in distinguishing these 2 things, always in economics, by the way, and particularly here, because this is more of external things than the internal things like production cost and all. Those are not having much of external influences. Those are mostly internal to the organization. But when we're talking about market, that itself is a vast concept. And there are so many external factors will be there, which cannot be just imbibed into while answering the questions. We have to be carefully identifying the answers, but of course, with the solid theoretical understanding of these 4 types of market structures. Once again, practically there are thousands possible types of market structures we cannot define, but for theoretical purposes, a few theoretical market types only we are looking at now, which also will have most of the coverage in the real world. So keep that in mind before trying to understand what type of market structure is characterized by which features. Now coming to the four types of market structures, as we already discussed the names, perfect competition is one type of market structure. Name itself indicates. Perfect competition means many sellers are there, so many people are there, too much competition, and most importantly, they are all selling identical products to many buyers. So it's not just a few people, there are many people, and most of them are selling the identical products. There will not be much of a product differentiation. Products will be more or less identical in nature in the case of perfect competition. Example, once again, only example. Raitu Bazaar is a real example of that. If you go to a Raitu Bazaar, there will be many sellers. Vegetable market, let us say. In the vegetable market, there will be many sellers. Most of them will be selling the identical products only. There will not be much of super differentiation between the tomatoes sold by one counter and the tomatoes sold by another counter. More or less all of them will be very identical products. And so many people will come. Many buyers will come and they just go according to their choice to some shop and buy and go. That's all. So many sellers, identical products, many buyers. That's what is perfect competition. And that's what can be generally categorized for a very local level markets. Mostly what happens and what prevails, lot of products and industries will go through the second category, that is monopolistic competition. Here there are many sellers, but they are selling differentiated products. Sellers are there more here also. Monopolistic competition also is competition. But it is not perfect competition. They are not selling very identical products. They are selling differentiated products to many buyers. Practical example for FMCG products in India. There will be some sort of product differentiation that people will bring. One of the soaps will say that we have aloe vera in this. Another soap will say that we have sandal oil in this. Another body, some Dove or somebody will say that we have milk extract in this. Somebody will say badam is there. Somebody will say something else is there. Somebody now suddenly saying carbon is there. Now toothpastes are having salt. They are just trying to differentiate. That's all. Nothing else. Ultimately, those are the same products. But some differentiation they would try to show. As an example to understand, for many years, of course, traditionally, Indians used to have their brushing not with toothbrushes and all in the morning. They used to use small, what do you call it? The tree branches or sticks. That's what they used to do. Mostly the neem trees, sticks they used to use for daily cleaning of the teeth. And some of the people used to use coal also. Coal powdered, and they used to use that. Some of the people used to use salt also. And slowly tooth powders have come. Tooth powders first were mostly popular. To the extent of, I remember since our childhood, almost very early ages of my childhood, we used to use this tooth powder mostly. Almost up to 4 or 5 years, I can say. But later suddenly toothpastes have come. Tooth powder also, sometimes we used to use brush, sometimes that used to be just used with normal hand only. But ultimately, when the toothpaste has come as a product, brush has become inevitable, as good as. And toothpastes have ruled for a long time, definitely, even now. But the point is, irrespective of the brands those were available, remember Sibaka, Pinaka, something like that, Colgate, anyway there. These were some of the variety brands used to be there. selling toothpaste. One common point in all of them is all are white color only. Daily morning white color toothpaste used to be there. Then Close-Up has come. What was the advertisement of Close-Up those days initially when they launched? Somebody will go to his wash basin and squeezes the white color toothpaste, and it is so depressing in the morning that very dull and pale like that. So that is not going to start the day very energetically. So suddenly Close-Up comes, and that gives a red color toothpaste, and definitely it is like energetic and all, as shown in the advertisement. So just differentiation what? White color to red color. That is differentiation. Yes, that is differentiation. And then over a period of time, color toothpaste have started coming. Blue color also is there for Close-Up, and Colgate is having all colors toothpaste anyway. And somebody starts to sell Ayurvedic type of toothpastes like Vicco or Miswak, and Colgate also will have something else similar to that, herbal something. So every product is having its just a little bit of changes. Differentiation is there. There is heavy competition. Many sellers are there, by the way. And recent ones like Patanjali are also giving tough time to many FMCG giants because they are offering products at a lower price. So monopolistic competition is what we generally see. Most of the cases what we see is monopolistic competition. Perfect competition is almost impossible to exist. That is only for namesake. Because we need an example, a small example can be Raitu Bazaar, a small fish market or a vegetable market can be the best example because mostly the products are identical in that. But what we see in real life is, if at all we have to categorize, most of them will fall on the monopolistic competition model. Most of them. All the products that we use, we usually call it soaps, shampoos, toothpastes, and other things that we generally use on a regular basis. Most of them are falling under this category of monopolistic competition. Where there are many sellers, many of them are there definitely, but they are having some differentiation from one product to another product. Even in soaps also. Of course, nowadays each brand is having all types of flavors. So it has become more of brand differentiation than product differentiation, but still differentiation is there. But earlier, when we say soaps, for example, again in my childhood days, there used to be Lifebuoy, Lux. Lifebuoy is almost, actually speaking, it was used for cleaning the horses during British days, and that was the original use of Lifebuoy in British days. So horses used to be cleaned with that. Slowly, we also started using that. Means human beings also started using that. That is there. It used to be very solid and it will last for a lot of days. But with extensive advertisement and all stardom, like top stars of India, those days like Sridevi or other people, always used to be whoever is the #1 heroine, they will have Lux advertisement. So Lux used to be a very popular product and it has penetrated very quickly also. But the point here is, it has its own customer base. Lifebuoy has its own customer base. But differentiation comes from what? Differentiation comes from Mysore sandal soap. Because exclusively Mysore sandal soap, that's all. It is like sandal soap only. You cannot say Mysore aloe vera soap. You cannot say like now Mysore milk soap. No, Mysore means Mysore sandal soap only. Of course, it's a government owned organization which used to manufacture. Still, it is manufacturing a fantastic product which has been used since a long time. Like that Pierce used to be there. What is the differentiation for Pierce? That soap is transparent. That's all. That differentiation is there. Then Santur came, which never said fully sandal also, which never said it's something else also. It is a mix of both. So some different type of sandal soap giving a competition to Mysore sandal soap. But they don't say it is sandal as a differentiating factor, but they use advertisements in a variety way. So the point is, in monopolistic competition, when many players are there, each of them come with their own differentiation. They would try at least. Okay, this is my differentiation. This is what my product is super. This is how my product is best. So my toothpaste has salt. Like that they will tell. That is differentiation. When Indians used to really use salt for cleaning their teeth, then those people said that we are all barbarians and we don't know how to clean ourselves. But now, after these many decades, suddenly our companies come and say, does your toothpaste have salt? And this is what we have been doing. Before you introduced toothbrushes, toothpaste, and tooth powders and all this. What we are doing earlier. Now they are saying, does your toothpaste has carbon? This is what we are doing. What does coal mean? Just like that used to be used for cleaning the teeth, just like that for daily morning brushing purposes. But now, carbon, which was considered to be like a bad thing all these days, salt, these are all ingredients and they are telling this is a differentiation. Fine, whatever. Ultimately, the businesses want to sell their product. That is true. That is market. The point is, how can they do that? That is what they try to create, a kind of differentiation in their products. Some differentiation they would like to show. They try to show at least. That is monopolistic competition. Monopoly is a different type of market. Of course, again, it is not possible to have this generally, except when a single seller is only there producing for many buyers, and that will happen most of the cases when government is the owner of that organization. Generally, otherwise it is not possible. For any particular industry, for private sector, giving a monopoly is dangerous and it will definitely not give any fruitful results. So monopoly is something which practically is not possible. But once again, we are talking about theory here. So we have to understand the characteristics from a theoretical perspective. And this product is extremely differentiated because there is nobody else, right? Against whom you will differentiate first of all. If there are two products, you will say, okay, this is different from that. If there is only one product, that's it. There is no competition. Only one seller is there, only one player is there selling the products. And there is no competition, no other competitors who are producing similar goods or any close substitutes. That is what is monopoly. Once again, practically, we cannot see any examples of monopoly. Because we need example, something to understand, Indian Railways can be categorized as monopoly, but that is also not monopoly. Because Indian Railways has close substitutes. Instead of train, you can go by bus also. So, we cannot tell that exactly there is monopoly in any particular product or service. Even in the countries with command economy like China, monopoly of one organization is generally not possible. Yeah, two or more strong big organizations, yes, quite possible. But only one organization having a complete control on the entire market is practically not visible. Even if it is there, that is only most of the cases in the hands of the government. If you take telecom services in India, now there is no monopoly, at least looks like that from the face of it. But imagine like 25 years back, but just imagine. There was only one organization which gave telecom services in India. That was the Indian Telecom Department, later converted into BSNL, Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited. One organization, that's all. There is no competition for BSNL earlier. Only one organization used to give telecom services to the entire country. All people of India, from village to the biggest city, most of the telecom services are provided by only BSNL for normal consumers. Of course, there are telecom companies for railways separately, Railtel, etc. That is a different story. Those are not B2C situation. Those are B2B situations. B2C means business to consumer, business to customer. B2B means business to business. Business to business, actually, most of the times we don't even know what happens because it is all happening at a top level, very high level. Something will happen. Daily it will happen. We don't need to worry about it. So when we take examples to understand reality or at least understand theories from a realistic perspective, better to take B2C examples always. So BSNL was only B2C telecom operator in India for a long time. Monopoly that was. Later it has been almost, I would say, cancelled. That means the monopolistic power has been cancelled, and the monopolistic power has been completely diluted, and lot of competition has been brought into this country. That is when many operators have come into picture, as we know. Now again it is going back to a different situation. We'll come to that later. But if you look at the journey, basically from one organization, BSNL, monopolistic market to a monopolistic competition market, it became. At some point in time, almost it became a perfect competition also. So many players have started coming and offering telecom services in India. Like Airtel was there anyway, Vodafone, earlier it was called Hutch, and Telenor had a joint venture with Unitech and called as Uninor, Aircel. So many operators were there earlier, and slowly some of them, most of them, like Tata Docomo was there, and Idea is there anyway. So many operators were there who provided telephone services. Reliance, old Reliance, which is now not anymore existing, was also one of the players then. So when the competition was there, definitely there was a kind of more people or more providers of service in the country. Of course, it has its own advantages and disadvantages. Each of these structures will have its own advantages and disadvantages. Once again, our job is not to judge them. Our job is to know what they are. That's all. We are not here to judge them. We are not here to say that, oh, great thing happened in India. Nor are we here to say that bad thing happened. No. We are not here for that judgment process. That can be done at a later level when we reach that level of capacity to judge. As of now, at a student level, we have to know the things as they are. So perfect competition is possible very rarely, but possible when there are too many sellers selling very identical products. Monopolistic competition is more pervasive and more practical in nature. Most of the goods that we see around are under this category, where there will be many sellers, but still they have some differentiation in their products. Monopoly is something which is not so possible, but still there are some monopolies, particularly in the government sector, where there will be only single seller, no competition, no substitutes at all. Then there is another kind of market structure that is called oligopoly. Oligopoly is that where there are few sellers. So this is where the problem comes. When monopolistic competition was there, we said there are many sellers. Oligopoly, we say few sellers. What is many, what is few, who will define? I think 2 is few or 5 is few. Somebody may say 5 is many. So these are subjective things. That is where I was telling. Difficult to exactly tell what is few, what is many. But yes, oligopoly also is a type of monopolistic competition, only with some differences, of course, yes. But major difference there is, in monopolistic competition, there will be many sellers. In oligopoly, there are very few sellers. So practical example, few. One is monopoly. More than one, let us say Coca-Cola and Pepsi operating in the cool drink market, soft drink market. That can be called as oligopoly. Can be called. Because definitely 2 cannot be called many. 2 is not many for sure. So 2 is few. We can come to that conclusion. So example for oligopoly, the best example can be the soft drink market. They will sell competing products. Usually there will not be much of differentiation, and there will be many buyers always. See, market will have always many buyers. So many buyers, we don't have to look at. Look at who is offering. Perfect competition, many sellers are offering. What kind of products they are offering? Identical products. Monopolistic competition also, many sellers are offering. What kind of products they are offering? Not identical, differentiated products. Monopoly, only one seller is offering. Because it is anyway one seller, it is extremely differentiated product. Oligopoly, few sellers are offering, are selling, and they are having competing products, but not as differentiated as in the case of monopolistic competition. So all these things can be summarized into this table. This is a table that you have to remember, and questions will definitely come from this, and you have to be very careful in identifying the characteristics of each of these types of markets. very, very important table, I would say. It has to be remembered very well. Okay. So look at this various types of features of different types of markets. First, perfect competition, let us take one by one, let us take. Or we can take this type also. We can take on the basis of number of sellers also. Let us take this way. Number of sellers. Number of sellers, how they will be in perfect competition? Very large number. What is very large? Don't try to give any number to that. But very large. Monopolistic competition, large number of sellers. Oligopoly, few sellers. Monopoly, only one seller. That's it. Differentiation. Will there be product differentiation in perfect competition? None. All potatoes in the Raitu Bazaar are more or less same. There is no much of product differentiation there. In monopolistic competition, yes, there is a slight product differentiation. There is differentiation in monopolistic competition, but not too much. But there is slight product differentiation. But main is, in oligopoly, it can be anywhere from none to substantial. Where it will fall, anywhere it will fall. That is where the complication once again comes. Monopoly, extreme differentiation, because there is no competition to compare also. There is only one product. That's it. Where can you differentiate it from other? So extreme differentiation is there in monopoly. No differentiation is there in perfect competition. Monopolistic competition and oligopoly will have sometimes a slight differentiation. Monopolistic competition will definitely have some differentiation. But oligopoly sometimes may not have any differentiation also. For example, if you once again take the example of oligopoly, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, both are there. What differentiation they have, really speaking? Okay, some might say this is a little sweeter than the other one. Those things are fine, but what is the differentiation in them, really speaking? Let us not, just for argument's sake, tell that there is differentiation. If we have a Coca-Cola 200 ml or a Pepsi 200 ml bottle separately after some time, what differentiation it will give us? Practically nothing. Both are black colored, both are sweet, both are having carbon dioxide, both are having sugar. Same. Even bottles also more or less same they will pack. More or less. They will show, if at all they show the differentiation only in the shapes of the bottles. That's all. Is that real differentiation? Is that called a product differentiation? I don't think so. It's only packing differentiation. If at all, that too is not there. Most of the cases the bottles are also similar. But little bit of differentiation only will be there. If at all there is, that will be in packing differentiation. Product differentiation, where is it? Thumbs Up, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, all three are black drinks only. As simple as that. All three are carbonated, cola-based drinks. Same things. Okay, Sprite and 7-Up. What differentiation will be there? Much. Nothing. Nothing. That is oligopoly. Oligopoly will have not much differentiation. Monopolistic competition will have at least some differentiation. In oligopoly, differentiation is almost sometimes negligible also. Same like, if you take the flavors like Mirinda or Fanta, what is the difference? Both are orange colored drinks. More or less same taste. Okay, Slice or Maaza or Fruity. Three companies let us take. Parle is also there. What is the differentiation we can take in that? Not much. The point is, more or less, they will have same kind of taste and the same kind of product, ultimately. That is what oligopoly is. In general, not much of differentiation can be seen in oligopoly. Oligopoly becomes little bigger. That becomes monopolistic competition. They start to show differentiation. That is where monopolistic competition and oligopoly are very, very close to each other. Not very easy to differentiate them, but we have to differentiate them if required on the basis of characteristics like this. And what about the price elasticity of demand of a firm? In case of perfect competition, it is infinite. Because if you go to Raitu Bazaar, if one person is selling potatoes at 40 rupees per kilo, another person is selling at 80 rupees per kilo or 50 rupees per kilo, why would you buy at that high price when it is available at a lower price? Automatically, the price elasticity will be infinite, almost very large. Instead of calling large, because it is perfect competition, which is anyway not existing, infinite also is not existing, but just theoretical sake. Because it is perfect competition, the price elasticity of demand of a firm will be infinite in that. In case of monopolistic competition, the price elasticity is huge. It is. And in case of oligopoly, the price elasticity will be small in monopoly, but oligopoly also there will be price elasticity, provided if both the players are not colluded. So there is once again other aspects to be looked at. So price elasticity of demand for a oligopoly is small. We cannot 100% say it is correct. But still, if the players are colluded with each other, then the price elasticity is small, because anyway people have no choice. Let us say Coca-Cola, Pepsi, both of them have agreed to increase the bottle price by 2 rupees. Then what you can do, what I can do, if at all we want to really have it, we will have it. Price elasticity will not be that much for a firm, because there are only very few players. If all of them go in the same direction, generally which they do, then the price elasticity will not have, the price change will not have huge impact on the demand. So that is why in oligopoly price elasticity is small. But once again, it depends upon outside factors also. It depends upon how the limited number of players are having a relationship with themselves, among themselves, how they have, that also matters a lot. If they are colluded, then price elasticity is almost as good as not there, very small. If they are not, if they are really tough competition, really they are giving tough competition to each other, which happens most of the cases, then price elasticity will be high there also. Nobody will be interested to increase the price, because product differentiation is so low there. Just because, let us say, only Coca-Cola increases the price of a bottle by 1 rupee, the demand for Coca-Cola might decrease very drastically. All the people who drink Coca-Cola might shift to Pepsi. So they don't dare to do that. So that is the reason we cannot say price elasticity is small in all cases, but generally it is small, because generally the firms which are operating in a oligopoly will operate in tandem with others' policies. Nobody will just like that have their own one-sided policies. Always they observe closely each other. That is how oligopoly works. So yes, it is possible to be small, and yes, it is possible to be very huge also, depending upon nature of the relationship between the firms in that oligopolistic market. And what about the control of the organization on the price? In perfect competition, no control, because market decides the price ultimately. Monopolistic competition will have some control, oligopoly also will have some control, and in monopoly very considerably, because the player has complete power on the market. He can decide whatever the price he wants. So very considerably monopolist will have control on the price. That is how these types of markets will behave in general. Again, I am repeating, these are theoretical structures, but we took examples only for understanding the structures. Don't try to remember the structures by examples. No. Structure has to be remembered by its characteristics, not by examples. Examples are there for understanding the characteristics, not the other way around. So be clear on that. Remember this table very well. Important table. Many questions can come from this. And the features of each type of market is crucial to be understood in this particular chapter, because that is the objective of this chapter ultimately. Types of markets and price determination in different types of markets. Price determination we will see later in the third unit. But here we are trying to understand different types of markets first. That's what is the 4 types of markets we can generally observe. Perfect competition on extreme side, and other extreme side is monopoly. Completely opposite with each other. Somewhere in between there are monopolistic competition and oligopoly, and those are so closely related with each other that it is sometimes difficult to differentiate those two also. So the characteristics of these market types has to be particularly remembered and understood. Now moving on to the very important aspect of revenue. Earlier we have discussed about the theories of production, cost and all. Anyway, the theories of production is not related to money. That's purely the quantitative related analysis. And even if you look at demand, supply also, it is mostly once again related to the quantity. Not much with money, though certain areas like price is also definitely looked at. Income is related to money, yes. Similarly, the budget line talks about money. Yes, those are there. But still, largely speaking, the concepts basically focusing on demand, supply, production, mostly those are all related to the quantities. But theory of cost is the one which is related to money very much, which we discussed earlier. Now, once again, simple point. When ultimately your objective is to have higher profit, as we just now discussed, ultimately any firm would like to have higher profit. That is the objective. Climax is that only. For that, we should know what is the concept of revenue and we should know what is the concept of cost. Concept of cost we already understood. We have to understand the concept of revenue also so that we can understand how the profit can be maximized. That is the purpose. Now in this chapter, we are supposed to also understand the concepts of total revenue, average revenue and marginal revenue. Just like we already understood total cost, average cost, marginal cost. Logic is same, but the point is different. Cost is for the expenditure incurred by the organization. Revenue is the benefit that organization gets by selling its products. So revenue concepts are crucial here so that at a later stage we can merge both the cost concept and revenue concept and find out the best possible outcome, best possible course of action for the organizations. As I said, that will be the climax of this business economics. But before that, we need to know these concepts of revenue. What is revenue here? First of all, total revenue means what? It's common sense. Imagine if a firm is selling 100 units at 10 rupees each. What is the sales? Naturally 1000 rupees. That is revenue. What is that? That is nothing but total revenue of the firm. Nothing new or nothing special we are knowing here. So what is total revenue? Simply speaking, P into Q. That means price of a product that we are selling multiplied with number of units of the product that we are selling. So TR is total revenue, P is the price, Q is the quantity of the commodity that is sold. That's it. That is what is total revenue. Nothing new or special or great here. Everybody knows this. Total revenue is not something new. Simply multiplying the number of units of sale with the selling price of each unit. That is total revenue. For example, here, just once again, you take the price of a product is 30 rupees and the quantity sold is 40 units. Then naturally what will be the total revenue? 30 rupees into 40 units. That is 1200. That is the total revenue for a particular organization. And if you look at figure A is nothing but demand curve actually. What is figure A denoting? You have to look at the graph. Observe it carefully. What is there on the x-axis? That is quantity. What is there on the y-axis? That is price. So that means what graph this is representing, this A1. That is a demand curve, right? That is a demand line. And as we know, as the price of the product decreases, quantity increases. That's fine. That we already know. But point is, what is total revenue here? What is total revenue at this point? What is the total revenue? At that point, what is the price you have to look at? Which is 30 rupees. At that point, what is the quantity you have to look at? Which is 40 units. Multiply both. That's what is total revenue. So, this area, multiplying both, will be total revenue. This area will be total revenue of a firm when it is selling 40 units at a price of 30 rupees per unit. Then only. If a firm is selling let us say here 40 rupees price and let us say 20 units is the quantity, then the total revenue would be 800 only. Here at this point, if at all we take, let us say if we take this point 20, just for understanding, let us say 65. So 20 into 65 gives 1300 revenue here at this point. So total revenue will change also according to which point we are taking. At point E, where we have taken 30 rupees price, at 30 rupees price a firm can sell 40 units of its product, which means it can earn 1200 total revenue. If it increases the price to 40 rupees, it can sell only 20 units. That means the total revenue will also be lesser. This area is lesser, right? This area is lesser. That is total revenue. Then it will be only 800. But on the other side, if the firm reduces the price from 30 to 20, it can increase the number of units sold from 40 to 65. Then the total revenue will be larger. That is 1300. So any point of contact on the demand curve, we can find out what is the total revenue, which is nothing but once again price multiplied with quantity. And these are the only two things in the demand curve, right? Price on the y-axis, quantity on the x-axis. So total revenue is brought like that. But now if you draw the graph of total revenue separately, which is there in panel B, this is total revenue curve. So as the output sold is increasing, the total revenue is also increasing here. So when number of units sold is increasing, automatically the total revenue is also increasing. But when? When is that? When a firm is having a perfectly elastic demand curve. A perfectly elastic demand curve, as shown in figure A, will show as the output sold increases, the total revenue also increases. That's what happened, right? Let us say from 40 to 65. At 40, just for imagination, this is, let us say, output sold is 40 units. What was the total revenue as we calculated? It was 1200. Let us say if the output sold is 65 as we calculated, how much will be the total revenue? That was 1300. So the total revenue increases as the quantity sold has increased naturally. So that is what happens in case of a perfectly elastic demand curve. And the curve which is there in figure A is anyway depicting the perfectly elastic demand curve. Again, not like 100% perfectly elastic we are talking about. We are talking about, generally speaking, unitary elastic in this case. Not to mix with perfect elastic and perfectly inelastic. There is nothing called perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic. But yes, if at all, we imagine a perfectly elastic situation, which means what? At a particular price, a firm can sell any quantity in the market. Then, naturally, the total revenue line is linear and starts from the origin. And the total revenue curve of a firm which has a downward sloping demand curve was shown in figure 2. So if the, as shown in this earlier figure, that is figure 1 only. So now, what was in the figure A here, which was showing a unitary elastic type of situation almost, that is a downward sloping demand curve. How the total revenue of that will be there, that is shown in a separate figure 2. Later we will discuss that. That is for a downward sloping demand curve form, which is normal, which is quite normal, because normally the demand curve is downward sloping only. But what is this B showing here is this. This can be a bit by itself. If a firm has a perfectly elastic demand curve, then how the total revenue will be? It will start from origin. Naturally, when output sold is 0, total revenue will be always 0. Total revenue always starts from origin. There is no question or change in that. But it is a straight line, and it is a linear graph starting from origin. That is total revenue. So by looking at this diagram, what we should interpret? This is representing an organization with a perfectly elastic demand curve. So this is different. This is in figure 2. How the total revenue of this situation will be is shown in figure 2 later, which is a downward sloping demand curve. So these two are not directly related with each other, but just to understand the concept of total revenue, the demand curve is also given in figure A. But important point here is about figure B. A is nothing new to us. A is already known to us. What is new here is only that total revenue is equal to price multiplied with quantity. That's all. But how the graph of total revenue curve will be, how the line of total revenue will be, that is linear starting from origin. In case of perfectly elastic demand curve, if an organization is having a perfectly elastic demand curve, then the total revenue line will be linear starting from origin. That is a straight line. Is it possible? Practically, no. Practically not possible, because perfectly elastic, there is no possibility. When we say perfectly elastic, how the demand curve will be? Perfectly elastic means irrespective of changes in the price, irrespective when there is a without any change in the price also, at a particular price, the quantity can be infinite. So, when we say a particular firm is having perfectly elastic situation, that will be parallel to x-axis. Means what? At a particular price, at this particular price, any amount of goods can be sold. That's what we are talking about. So this is perfectly elastic. This graph results in total revenue like this. That is what is the essence of the paragraph above this figure 1. So when the firm is having a perfectly elastic situation, then the total revenue will be a linear curve starting from origin. That's it. That is total revenue. Then what is average revenue? Average always is what? Total divided by Q, naturally. When you say average revenue is equal to total revenue by Q, that is what is average revenue. That is nothing but total revenue divided by the quantity. But when we know the total revenue is nothing but P into Q by Q, that means what is average revenue? Nothing but price. So ultimately average revenue is what? That is price of the commodity, that's all. Imagine a firm realizes 1000 rupees by selling 100 units. What is the average revenue? 10 rupees. And that is the average revenue. That will be the price of the commodity in general. So when total revenue is equal to P into Q, average revenue is equal to P into Q divided by Q. Ultimately Q and Q will get cancelled. Only P will remain. So average revenue is nothing but price of the commodity in general. Once again, it is not just one price, because the prices can change. But on an average, that is a price. On an average, that is a revenue over a number of units that are sold in a particular period. So that is what is average revenue. Then what is marginal? Again, same concept. Marginal means 1 plus. What is marginal? Anytime. Now it is revenue. But marginal we know already. What is marginal? The change in the total as a result of change in one additional unit of commodity. But total of what here? Total of revenue, because we are talking about marginal revenue. So how much change in the total revenue will happen from sale of one additional unit of commodity? That is called marginal revenue. For example, if a seller realizes 1000 rupees when he sells 100 units, and if he realizes 1200 rupees when he really sells 101 units, then what is marginal revenue? By selling one more unit, how much he got? 200 rupees. That means the marginal revenue in that case is 200 rupees. So what is marginal revenue? This is a very important formula. Not just one unit we can take. Sometimes we can take the difference between total revenue divided by difference in quantity. That is what is marginal revenue. Another example if you take, let us say 100 units are sold and a total revenue of 1000 has been earned by an organization. Let us say 150 units are sold and say 2000 revenue has been earned. Example only. Then what is the marginal revenue if the question is asked? What is that? Difference between total revenue 2000 minus 1000, that is delta TR divided by delta Q. Difference between quantity 50. So what is going to be the marginal revenue here? 20. That is the marginal revenue of 1 unit. Though we don't calculate for 1 unit, that is the marginal revenue of each unit, after you sold 100 units, each of the 50 units got how much revenue? That is 20 rupees. 50 into 20, that resulted in an additional revenue of 1000 to the total revenue. So that is why marginal revenue can be calculated as difference in total revenue divided by difference in number of units of commodity, number of units of quantity of the commodity that has been sold. That is marginal revenue. If delta Q is 1 already, let us say only 1 unit is there changed, then TR, whatever it changes, that itself becomes marginal revenue. Like in our example earlier, 1000 rupees was the total revenue by selling 100 units. 100 units sold, 1000 was the total revenue in that example given already. 101 units sold, 1200 was the total revenue. So how much is the marginal revenue? Difference in revenue is 200 divided by difference in quantity is 1 only. So we don't need to do that. That means marginal revenue itself is 200. That's what was given here as marginal revenue. Anyway, the formula for marginal revenue and concept of marginal always has to be very clearly understood and applied. Difference between total revenue divided by difference between the quantity is what is marginal revenue. Or it can be even defined like this. This is always the same logic. Marginal revenue of nth unit is equal to total revenue of n units minus total revenue of n minus 1 units. That's what is marginal revenue. And these things can be understood with this table also, which we will also draw as a graph in next figure 2. As the number of units are sold and they are increasing like this from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 like that, what happens to the total revenue? Let us see this scenario. It's an example. Total revenue is increasing. So 10 it became, again 18, again 24, 28, 30. Up to 30 it has increased. Then it has stagnated. Then it started declining. From here onwards, this all area, the total revenue was declining. This area was all declining total revenue. Right? So, this is the nature of total revenue. But what happens to the average revenue? Let us understand that. Average revenue is what? Total revenue divided by number of units. Let us say average revenue of 4 units is how much? 28 divided by 4. That is 7. Same way. What is the average revenue of, let us say, 7 units? 28 divided by 7. That is 4. What is the average revenue of 9 units? 18 divided by 9. 2. So average revenue is nothing but total revenue divided by number of units. That is naturally here decreasing straight from the beginning. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like that it started decreasing. But look at marginal revenue. This is an interesting and important point. What is marginal revenue? What is the additional revenue generated from selling one more unit? Of course, first unit marginal revenue is the total revenue of first unit only. Second unit marginal revenue is how much? Total revenue changed from 10 to 18. That means the marginal revenue is 8. Then third unit, 18 to 24. Difference is 6 rupees. So from 24 to 28, the total revenue has increased. That means marginal revenue is 4 rupees. 28 to 30, from 4th unit to 5th unit. Total revenue has increased. By selling 5 units, you get 30 rupees total revenue. By selling 4 units, you got only 28 rupees total revenue. What is the marginal revenue of the 5th unit then? 2 rupees. From 5th to 6th, marginal revenue is 0. And there onwards, the marginal revenue started declining. Not only that, it started declining from the beginning only, but it started negative also. When is that? When already the total revenue has peaked, which is 30. That is where the marginal revenue was 0. And from there, when the total revenue started declining in this region, this is the region where marginal revenue is negative. This is the relationship we have to keep in mind. Very similar, but this also has to be separately understood and applied in the questions. This is revenue concept. Total and marginal concepts are same. Concepts are same. Application is only different. We are applying them for revenue, not for cost. Earlier we did the same for cost. That is separate. This is separate. Don't mix them. Just because concepts are them, same. We cannot have overlap of them in the mind. Mind has to be very clear. In case of total revenue, it is increasing initially and it is maximum at certain time and later it started declining. When the total revenue started declining, marginal revenue became negative. Average revenue has only one tendency, it always keeps on declining. That's all. But another point to be noted here. Can average revenue be zero? Is it possible? No. If average revenue is zero, why? That means what? Price is zero. That means you are giving it for free. Anybody is there to give it for free just like that? No. Average revenue cannot be zero because once again we are talking about economics, not some philanthropy, charity, free service. No. So in economics, average revenue can never be zero because exchange value cannot be zero. Exchange value should be there in economics, which is price, which is average revenue. So point to be noted also is average revenue will keep on falling, no doubt. But that will never become zero. Can marginal revenue become zero? Of course, yes, it has become zero here. It has become zero when already the total revenue has peaked. Can marginal revenue be negative? Yes, of course, it has become negative in all these cases. Average revenue can never be zero or negative. Total revenue cannot be zero also, obviously. But marginal revenue can be zero also, negative also. Okay. These are the characteristics that we should understand related to the total revenue and marginal revenue. And of course, the points that we have to identify are same. The logic is always the same. If you observe the same table, what are the things that we can observe? First thing first, average revenue keeps on falling. That is showing what? The inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded. That is the theory of demand, right? That is the inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded. Because of that, the average revenue keeps on falling. Because you can sell more quantity only at a lower price. No option. That is what the law of demand says. So average revenue keeps on falling. That is a demand function actually. That is a demand curve of any particular firm. So we can also say average revenue line itself is demand curve. That is a demand line for a firm. Then what about marginal revenue? Marginal revenue keeps on falling also, and after becoming zero it becomes negative. Of course, anything after becoming zero becomes negative only. But when it starts becoming negative, once the total revenue reaches the highest. And also, we know this already, the total revenue is what? At any particular level of output is the sum of the marginal revenues till that level of output. Sum of the marginal revenues is nothing but total revenue. Anywhere it is the same. Sum of the marginal only is total. Let us say, if you want to know what is the total revenue of 5 units, you have to add all the marginal revenues of these 5 units. That's all. So 10 plus 8, 18 plus 6, 24 plus 4, 28 plus 2, 30. That is the total revenue. So add all the marginal revenues, till then you will get total revenue, reverse way. Either way, we should be able to do that. That is the point. Now, marginal revenue, total revenue and average revenue have this type of relationship. And what is the slope of total revenue curve? So slope of total revenue will be always marginal. Slope of total always will be marginal only, which is nothing but dtr by dq, and we don't have to do any differentiation at all in mathematics here, not required. Just to understand that, this is a common thing already we should know. Total revenue curve's slope is marginal revenue. Anything total's slope is marginal only. And marginal's area, total area is total. That is always common. So these two logics already we know that. And the relationship between the total revenue, average revenue and marginal revenue is like that. This can be also expressed in the form of graphs. How this can be expressed in the form of graphs? This is the graph that you should be able to draw or at least interpret. First thing first, if you look at the total revenue, what is happening? Naturally, it will start from 0. And as the number of units are increasing, it is also increasing and it reaches a peak level at this point. And identify what happened at that point At that point, the marginal revenue became zero. At the same point. That is the same point where the marginal revenue is zero. And when the total revenue started declining, marginal revenue turned negative. It was declining from day one, but now it has turned negative when the total revenue also started declining after this point. Okay, that is one thing we have to identify from the graph, which we identified from the table also. Then another thing is average revenue. What is average revenue? Average revenue is nothing but the demand curve of that firm. That is the demand curve. Just like the demand curve of that particular organization is average revenue. Demand curve slopes downwards. Average revenue also slopes downwards. Nothing special there. But point to be noted, average revenue will not touch x-axis. Why? Because average revenue cannot be zero. Not possible. That's it. That is about relationship between total revenue and marginal revenue, very particularly. Average revenue is also there somewhere here. It is not that important because it is just representing the price. More important thing is difference or relationship between total revenue and marginal revenue. What are the points to be noted? When total revenue is at its peak, marginal revenue becomes zero. When total revenue is declining, marginal revenue turns negative. Marginal revenue is always lower than average revenue. That is also one observation we can make from this. And marginal revenue, average revenue both start from same point. Marginal revenue is always lower than average revenue. Average revenue can never become zero. These are the observations we can draw from this graph, and same things which are also given in the table. That is a situation related to the total revenue, average revenue and marginal revenue for a firm which has a downward sloping demand curve. How do we know it is downward sloping demand curve? Because this is downward sloping. This is not perfect competition. So, if the perfect competition was there, perfectly elastic situation was there, if the firm is having perfectly price elastic situation, then the total revenue will not be like this. Total revenue would have been, as we discussed earlier, like this. It will be like this. But in this case, where the elasticity, price elasticity is downward sloping. This is not a perfectly elastic situation. This is a downward sloping normal situation of price elasticity of demand going downwards. In this case, the total revenue is increasing up to certain level and later it started decreasing. That is the difference in total revenue. But anyway, the earlier situation, what we have looked at, in case of perfectly elastic firm, the total revenue being a linear straight line starting from the origin is a very exceptional situation, but it can be asked as a question separately. For a normal downward sloping price elasticity situation, which will be the normal case, this is what we have to remember as far as the total revenue is concerned. It will go upwards and then slightly it might go downwards later. But when it reaches the peak, the marginal revenue becomes zero, and when the total revenue starts declining, marginal revenue starts becoming negative. That's what we have to identify here. And in all the cases where there is a imperfect competition, the average revenue curve of individual firm slopes downwards, and in all the cases which normally happens, whenever the firm increases the price of the product, the quantity demanded will decrease. That's what is the law of demand. When the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. That is why the average revenue curve, which is also representing the demand curve, will slope downwards. That is the point to be noted. However, in case of perfect competition, which is imaginary, since the firms are price takers, they are not price makers, the average revenue or price curve or demand curve, that is perfectly elastic in that case, which means price cannot be changed at all. Price is fixed. Price is not going to be changed at all. That is perfectly elastic, right? In case of such perfectly elastic situation, which happens in an imaginary perfect competition, then the total revenue curve, as we have seen here on the left hand side, it will go upwards only as a linear curve. So this is the situation which is possible only in perfect competition, and in all the other cases of imperfect competition, which are more possible, the situation of total revenue curve will be like this. That is the graphical representation of total revenue curve. But as I said, average revenue is something which is equivalent to price, and that will become constant in case of perfect competition, because the firms are not in a position to change their prices. But in case of all other forms which are imperfect competition, like monopoly, oligopoly, monopolistic competition, in all those cases, the average revenue will be sloping downwards, which is nothing but the demand curve of that firm also. That is the essence of the revenue concept that we have to understand. And also another point to be noted, though we will discuss it later in Unit 3 in detail, when the price remains constant, marginal revenue and average revenue also will be same. And that too, when it will happen? Only in the case of perfect competition. Marginal revenue will be same as average revenue because the price is constant. If you sell 1 unit at, let us say, 10 rupees, and if you sell second unit also at 10 rupees, total revenue is 20, average revenue is 10, marginal revenue is also 10. So marginal revenue is equal to total revenue in case of perfect competition, perfectly elastic demand curve, where the average revenue and marginal revenue will be horizontal curves, as we have seen earlier also, how that will happen in case of perfect competition. Once again, not practically possible, but theoretically anything can be asked. So when there is perfect competition, naturally the price elasticity is perfectly elastic. That means the demand curve is horizontal to x-axis. That means average revenue and marginal revenue also are parallel to x-axis because both are same. There is no difference between average revenue and marginal revenue in case of perfect competition. But how will be the total revenue in this same scenario? Total revenue, if you want to know, that will be like this. It will only go up. But in case of imperfect competition, which is most likely the practical scenario, where the demand line is going downwards, that means average revenue line is going downwards. In that scenario, the total revenue will first go upwards, then starts coming downwards. And when the total revenue turns downwards, marginal revenue starts becoming negative, as depicted in figure 2. This is the relation between total revenue, average revenue and marginal revenue for firms having downward sloping demand curve and the firms with perfect competition or perfectly price elastic firms. Of course, in case of perfectly price elastic firms, the total revenue will only go upwards as a linear straight line starting from origin, as we have already observed. Now, let us go ahead with the understanding of the relation between the average revenue, marginal revenue, total revenue and price elasticity of demand also. We can observe that in the graphs, but how they are mathematically related also, let us understand that now. The equation here showing the relation particularly between the marginal revenue and average revenue is MR is equal to AR into E minus 1 divided by E, and where E is price elasticity of demand. E minus 1 by E multiplied with AR is equal to MR. And naturally, different possibilities will emerge from this. What if the elasticity of demand is equal to 1. In other words, it is a unitary elastic scenario. Substitute it in the formula. 1 minus 1, 0. 0 divided by anything is 0 only. So, if elasticity of demand is equal to 1, then marginal revenue is equal to 0. That is going to be equal to 0. If elasticity of demand is more than 1, then naturally the numerator, which is E minus 1, will be also more than 1, and will be positive definitely, because when E is more than 1, E minus 1 is going to be positive, and because that is positive, E is positive, AR is positive, MR also will be positive. So that can be observed with an example. Let us say if E is less than 1, like 0.7, then numerator will be 0.7 minus 1, which will be negative. Then in that scenario, the entire right hand side is negative, which means the marginal revenue will also be negative in that case. If E is greater than 1, MR will be positive. If E is less than 1, marginal revenue will be negative. And if E is equal to 1, then marginal revenue is equal to 0. That's what we can understand in relation to the relationship between marginal revenue and average revenue with a formula. And this formula is very important. You have to remember this formula. Problems or questions will definitely come from this. And the relationship between these three items, elasticity of demand, marginal revenue and average revenue, has to be very well remembered in the form of the formula. MR is equal to AR into E minus 1 divided by E. That's what happens. And if we observe this with a point elasticity type of demand curve, which is shown in the diagram in the next page, the demand curve, which is naturally sloping downwards from left to right, and as we earlier also in the chapter of theory of demand observed, at the center point of that demand curve, E will be equal to 1, and above that point, the elasticity, point elasticity naturally will be more than 1, and below that point, elasticity will be less than 1. And this already we know, nothing new in this first graph, which is just showing the demand curve, which is also average revenue curve incidentally, because average revenue curve, price curve, demand curve, all are same. But point here is how the marginal revenue is behaving in relation with average revenue curve or demand curve. When the elasticity of demand, which is E, is greater than 1, that is shown by the upper segment of the demand curve. If that is the situation, then observe the marginal revenue curve. All that marginal revenue has been positive. It has always been positive. So marginal revenue was positive till E is equal to 1. And if E is greater than 1, the marginal revenue is positive. So when marginal revenue is equal to 0, when E is equal to 1. And when marginal revenue is negative, going below the x-axis, when E is less than 1. That can be observed from this graph very clearly. And one more point also can be observed related to total revenue, which is maximum at the place where marginal revenue is equal to 0. And when marginal revenue was going downwards, negative, total revenue also started becoming downwards. So these are all the things which we observed in the table also earlier. The same things can be observed from this graph, which is showing the elasticity of demand also. It is showing the demand curve also, which is also AR curve. And it is showing the MR curve also. And total revenue also, first which is going upwards, then coming downwards. That is the relationship between AR, MR, TR and price elasticity of demand. In a nutshell, in one graph we can understand all the things that we have try to learn in this session, wherein all these things are interrelated with one another, but what is the relationship between them can be observed from these graphical representations. Very, very important aspects. That is the concepts of revenue. Of course, we will mix the concepts of revenue with the concept of cost in the upcoming sessions. But as far as this particular session is concerned, our focus has been on the concepts of revenue, which tell us about relationship between these four items: average revenue, total revenue, marginal revenue, and elasticity of demand. All these things can be summarized in one particular graph. That is what is depicted here. And this relationship also between average revenue, marginal revenue, very important. MR is equal to AR into E minus 1 divided by E. That relationship also can be observed from this graph. When E is greater than 1, MR is positive. If E is equal to 1, MR was 0. If E is less than 1, MR became negative. That is when the total revenue also started becoming or coming downwards. That is the nutshell or essence of this entire topic of revenue related concepts. And in the next session we discuss about behavioral principles of the firms, wherein we will mix not only the revenue concept but also the cost concepts. So whatever that we have understood so far since the beginning, the theory of demand, supply, price determination, theory of cost, all of them are going to culminate at one place. That is the essence, or that is the crux of chapter 4 itself. So this chapter is all about understanding the types of markets, in a different types of markets, how the revenue curves will behave, and of course we know how the cost curves will behave. Cost will not have any influence of the market directly. It is an internal thing. Revenue will have influence of the market. So that is why this chapter is more about market and its influence on the revenues of an organization. Once we mix these two, the revenue and the cost, that will give the best possible course of action for any organization under different market circumstances. Because different market circumstances will give rise to different types of revenue curves. And when we merge them with the cost curves, we'll come to know what is the best possible course of action for the organizations in different market conditions. With that, we'll conclude this session, and in the next session, we'll discuss about some of the behavioral principles for the organizations, mixing the revenue as well as cost concepts. But what is important? So far what we discussed in this chapter 4 is, of course, one, the types of markets and their characteristics, which is mostly conceptual, theoretical in nature, and technical aspect of revenues. That is also very, very important. Total revenue means what? Average revenue means what? Marginal revenue means what? And what is the relationship between them? That too, what is the relationship between them in a perfectly competitive situation, and what is the relationship between them in an imperfectly competitive situation? Both of them we have to understand and comprehend and interpret. And when the questions ask those things, we should be able to apply those concepts, which we will also apply in unit 3 of chapter 4 also at a later stage. Fine. We'll discuss behavioral principles of organizations, so some of the things that organizations should not do or should do under different circumstances in the next session. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.